Okay, so about the cutting of hands and all of these things. See, again, we have to know Islamic law. So, for example, Dan mentioned the part about, most of the, theft, or most of, people stealing and theft and all of these things, it has to do with poverty, it has to do with hunger, it has to do with all these things. Absolutely, this is all a bunch of propaganda that's come out. I remember, growing up myself, I'm like, this is so bad. I remember watching Aladdin. Anyone seen Aladdin before? Come on, that's it. I have the whole soundtrack memorized still. It just won't go out of my head. Come from a land, from a faraway place, with etc. Anyway, that's one of the most biased movies I've ever seen. Now that I realize it, in fact, it was so biased that they had to change the opening song that actually started out there. The Disney actually had so many complaints, they actually had to change the song. And one of the biases which they did not correct is this image of the princess, taking the apple from the merchant and giving it to the poor kid. The poor kid who's sitting there doesn't have any food, doesn't have anything to eat. She takes the apple, she says, "You want this apple?" She takes the apple and she gives him the apple. And what do you have? You have this giant, huge, Persia, actually, well, it's in Persia, but this Arab-looking guy with the turban on, messed up teeth and all that, comes out and says, "Do you know what the punishment for stealing is?" And then he pulls out his sword and he puts her hand down on the floor and he's about to chop it off. Right? This is the imagery, and this is what we grew up with. Oh my goodness, how could a religion do something like this? This poor woman was stealing, etc., etc. But if you go and you look at Islamic law, we're talking about chopping a hand. There's so many conditions. I'm going to mention two major conditions in Islamic law that have to be fulfilled before you go and chop anyone's hand off. Number one is that person should not be stealing out of necessity. So if a person is stealing out of necessity, it does not apply at all. No one's hand gets cut. In fact, the person, if you want to punish someone, you're going to punish the guy who actually put him in that state, whether it's a government or whether it's official, whatever it is. Number two, that thing has to have a minimal value. So if you go and you steal a little apple, for example, that's not a sufficient amount of value. So when you study Islamic law, it has to have a specific value. I believe it's half a dinar or a quarter dinar or dirham or something like that. I forgot myself because we don't apply it. So I don't know. I didn't care to memorize it really, but there's a rule there. Number three is that thing has to be in a locked and stored place. If you steal something public, right, something that's publicly out there, right there, like the apple was sitting there, someone comes, it was not protected, it was not in a safe, it's not in a cash drawer, you go and you steal that thing, your hand doesn't get cut. So this whole concept of hand cutting and stuff like that, most Muslims don't even know the conditions. They don't know the conditions because if someone is stealing one thing for necessity, someone is stealing something because it's just hanging there and you're just kind of tempted and just kind of put it in your pocket or something like that. Something completely different, stealing from a supermarket, and someone going up to a cash register with a gun, going and taking that thing out. So these punishments are there. There's a bunch of conditions. We should know the conditions.